Well, good morning or good evening, everyone. This is the Lower Makefield Ad Hoc Property Committee. My name is Dennis Stedman, the chair of the committee. This is the January 27th meeting, and we have a busy agenda, and we have some guests whose time we are leaning on, and they're being very generous with, so we'll want to be efficient for them. The agenda has been posted. The meeting is called to order. We are, as a committee, working diligently to make some recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, which is targeted for the supervisor meeting of March 2nd. That's the deadline that we've imposed on ourselves. And we want to make recommendations concerning historical buildings and structures on the Patterson Farm, as well as a historical building at the Makefield Highlands Golf Course. There are 16 buildings at all, and two parcels in the macro sense. We're trying to do that in the context of balancing out three objectives that are somewhat sometimes have tension with each other. The first is to preserve history and to preserve agriculture in Lower Makefield Township. It's an important part of our community and an important part of our character and in our past, and we want it to be very much a part of our present. The second thing we're trying to balance along with that preservation is community use. We want to see the community support and utilize and enjoy these resources. And the third objective that is part of this balancing act is to do so fiscally responsible fashion. Budgets are not limitless. Money is real, and we have to be responsible to the taxpayers. So with that, that's kind of the background and the kickoff. I'll turn the meeting over to our secretary, Bet, for the approval of the January 13th meeting minutes. Bet?
Yes, the minutes of January 13th were distributed. I'd entertain a motion for approval or changes.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented on the 13th? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bet. Appreciate your efforts there. The next agenda item is farm preservation and reuse, and our member and Vice Chair Fred Childs is leading that subject matter. So, Fred, if I can turn it over to you for this segment.
Thanks, Dennis. We had the fortune of one of the members of the Lower Makefield Historic Society clued us in on a web forum that was held a little time ago, and we're fortunate about farm preservations and also barns as well. And one of those participants is here with us tonight, John Porter, from University of New Hampshire, and he's also invited Steve Bedard, who is a construction contractor who has experience in barn renovations, restorations. So I'd ask John and Steve if you can give us some insight on your experience, particularly with large barns. We did give you some information about the two barns that we're particularly interested in, and the size, the Pennsylvania type bank barn that we have that you may be familiar with, and that have deteriorated quite a bit. They haven't been used for many years. So I wanted to get your expertise and insight on what you've seen in terms of reusing those types of barns and what's involved with it, and generally maybe some kind of ballpark kind of cost figures that you've seen in the past. So
I'll few things and then ask Steve to join in. Of course, being a farm person, growing up on a farm and working with barn preservation, my number one choice would see it preserved, as a barn in a farming operation, but that sometimes is a challenge. I know one of your options, you showed having a farmer lease it or something. That can be a little risky because if it's not part of their prime operation, it may just deteriorate and not be a focal point. I know I've driven up through northern New York and so forth, and you've seen all these little tumble down barns with a big farm beside it using the land, but just letting the barn tumble down. I guess my second best choice, at least what we see in New Hampshire, if the farm is still operating, but not as a dairy like it might have been originally, but maybe a fruit farm or vegetable farm, and then they use the barn for a farm stand. And people love to come into these old barns and buy their vegetables and their fruits and just gaze at the beams and enjoy the historic value and so forth. So anyways, I like the agricultural things where we can. You can't always do that. I know you're looking at a lot of creative things. One thing was mentioned, even housing or something. I don't know how Steve feels, but I'm a little nervous on that one because sometimes you start seeing patio doors, bow windows, and all kinds of things, and it starts not looking like a barn. It's nice if you've got one you're preserving to have it enjoyed by the public. And that's where some of the arts things you've referred to, where people could come in and see things. It's nice to have somebody who really claims that barn in their stewardship, because otherwise things don't get taken care of. So I know in New Hampshire, we've had a few success stories with either towns or historical societies or somebody really taking it as a project and getting, public support, information in the newspapers, public meetings, public fund drives, and really getting it fixed up and having the public enjoy it, either at certain times when it's open for display or art display or whatever. So anyways, I like to see it enjoyed by as many people as possible. If you go the residential route, sort of be closed up, and it may not even look at like a barn after a while. And I know the public enjoys these buildings, but it takes somebody who really steps up as being the primary steward that can keep this going, because you've got the maintenance, it's got to be maintained as you go along. It's not just that first event. You've got to keep these going. And as we know, roofs, foundations, beams, all these things are got to be maintained. So Steve, I'll throw it to you, and maybe you can throw out some New Hampshire things. And he's the contractor guy who knows prices.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. I looked down through the list of 10 items you have here, and they're certainly all doable. Every single one of those things could work. It's just a matter of what you decide to do. Being contractor, I'd really like to have a little bit more information. Can you guys tell me, you said there's structural repairs and there's numbers assigned to those. Because there are no inside photographs, it's just the outside photographs look great. Can you give me an idea of what kind of structural repairs are contemplated in each of those two buildings?
Well, they each have, to some extent, stone foundations that would need repointing, at least in some cases, missing pieces, or there are sections on one of the barns that has been redone, I think, with concrete block part of it. So there's certainly some issues with foundation. There's been a lot of animal intrusion, so the ground floor have been very tunneled, so to speak, with the local wildlife, and there's also support columns that have been added over the years, and they're not necessarily in the right place or have sufficient support so that the upper floor in some areas is not suitable for heavy loads, so to speak. Obviously, the outside, the siding, clapboard siding, has weathered and a lot of space in there. But actually, we have Andrew and James from the engineers who might also talk to some of that. I know they looked at. I'm not sure if Andrew or James were involved with that, but
yeah, I can speak to some of the structural characteristics of the two barns. I did compose the facilities assessment and structural evaluation report. To start with the Cedar Reef barn, that barn had undergone some recent renovations in 2007. I did an analysis in a couple locations. Where you have typical column and beam spacing, it rated to store, farm equipment and bales of hay stacked 3 bales high throughout the entire framing plan. There's some critical beam and column spacing where you have just greater space in a much larger tributary area coming down to one common beam, and I ran an analysis for that, and it does not rate. You could put a couple additional girders and 2 columns in, and you'd be able to get it to rate. With the other barn at the Patterson farmstead, similar analysis where about 2/3 of the second floor was able to take on about 60 PSF bed load plus live load for storage of farm and equipment and bales of hay. Where there's some larger tributary area coming down to one critical column that does not rate based on my calculations. But to Fred's point, that barn has significant undermining of the columns. There's a concrete strip footing that the columns sit on, and there's animal burial halls all throughout where they're not fully supported on each side. So until those are filled in with compact soil, I wouldn't recommend putting anything on the second floor. But at least 2/3 of the floor plan for both barns rate for 60 PSF bed load plus 30 PSF live load throughout the second floor. And yeah, stone foundation, typical of a Pennsylvania barn.
And that brings me to my next question. Are these both posted beam structures? Or
Yes.
are they? Okay, so
Yes.
they're a true posted beam structure.
May I
More
do
than-
a share screen? I have the pictures up, so.
Okay.
Can you see some of that?
Yes, I can.
I could scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a combination post and beam with some balloon framing in between.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. Okay, well that's very helpful. That certainly does help the situation in helping me to be able to describe what can happen. We're always, John and I, as well as the people who are in the restoration world up in New Hampshire, and in your area too, I'm sure, we're always trying to keep these things on the same existing site, on the same location whenever possible. That's the first thing that's trying to do. And then you work it back from there on the property somewhere. If it has to be moved, can it be moved whole, or can it be? Both of these buildings look to me like they can be dismantled. You had number 9, deconstruct. We don't use deconstruct in New Hampshire. We say dismantled, because both of those buildings look to be in good enough condition so they could be numbered, documented, taken apart, and reused that way. Whether it be for housing, another private lot, commercial venture. In Gilmanton, in the town that I live in, we actually we moved a barn from the seacoast about an hour away, a 40 by 80 barn. It's now the library. And so it can be done. Of course, when you do that, and the engineers are going to, the engineers know that we're going to have to add things to make it stronger. And we're looking at our way, we're looking at 300 PSI. If there's any situations concerning loading for book stacks and the library and whatnot. So there's all kinds of things you can do with these barns, but obviously your goal is to try to keep it on site and use on site somehow. And I don't know if that answered your question, if you answered your question or not. But I'll take another one. Try another one.
Have there-
Another question,
The only
Steve.
thing that I would add is that, relocating those barns, if you'll see on the Patterson main barn that there's a stone wall that is, approximately the first level of the barn. And so that would not, that I don't think that could reasonably be transported to a different location. I think that.
Take that off the table. We're not talking about that. We're looking for uses on site.
Okay.
Yeah, we
The
are.
other thing I would add is that, it goes without saying probably that the painting of the barns is lead paint, and thus that would have to be remediated as well.
There again, at least in New Hampshire, it's not that big of a deal. You're certified to do it. It adds about 25% to up to 25% additional cost to do it that way, because you have to deal with the lead issue. But it's not as bad as we think of it once you learn how to do it appropriately.
And question for Steve or John. I mean, these two barns are on a 220 acre, preserved farmland. So we do want to use them, preserve them, keep them in place. And it's really about some utilizations. We think the farmer, the tenant can make farming use out of one barn, not two. But in the discussions of various options for these barns, we do have, kind of the more aggressive ideas, like, it becomes a public facility, it becomes a brew pub, it becomes a restaurant, or, some kind of commercial undertaking like that. And I mean, I grew up in one of these barns. I worked very hard on every first floor and second floor. I for one find those kind of plans very ambitious, just because I know what's there typically and what's not there. Talk to, I mean, do you have experience of barns of this age being converted to that kind of use, and the issues or magnitude of expense? I mean, I'm not against it. I'm just cautious on the expense side of that kind of idea.
Well, I would just speak. I know we do have some in New Hampshire. There is a brewery down on the coast that selected a barn that was on their property to use. It usually means a lot of reinforcement. And then, of course, in our areas, if you're on the edge of a city or something, you get into quite a few of the coding issues for safety, public safety, and exits and that sort of thing. But it usually means quite a bit of shoring up to get those where they can meet the load. So, Steve, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have at least, I can think of at least one. I'm sure I can think of a couple more of restaurants that are in old barns. We have one up around Lake Winnipesaukee that's a double English barn that was converted to a restaurant. I mentioned the Gilmanton year-round library. You can make them. We have done housing before, and if you were to look at the barns, you wouldn't know that it had housing in it the way it's constructed. We do a lot with French door units behind, stepped in behind. Big barn doors. So when the barn doors are closed, you have no idea that it's a house. It's just a barn. So you have, I guess what I'm coming to is, I'm glad to hear that you don't want to move it off site. So then it's a matter of which one of these options, and all of these options I think are acceptable. They all could work cost wise. It's not going to be, if you can get the outer structure and the support system, the foundation secured, so that it's appropriate, you can then build off of that, build from that, just like you would build any new project whatsoever. Up our way, we have to deal with snow load issues. I don't know if you had that same problem where you are and how difficult that is. A lot of times that's resolved by using a metal roof, so the snow won't stay on it. And so there's all kinds of things you can do to get to where you want to be. And the costs, I think when it comes down to, if you're going to use an old barn, once you have done repaired the structural issues like the foundation and the timbers, and have to add things, it's going to be about 10% more. Or it's, well, and now with our way, in our situation, materials have gone so crazy in cost, it's basically a wash. It used to be using an old barn frame for a house or whatever you want, or continue to use it for agricultural use, but upgraded it, is going to be about the same, about 10% more than what it typically costs to build new. Well, that's gone away now, at least up our way, due to the fact that materials are so costly and labor costs have gone crazy. So you just think about, it's not going to be more than building a new building or whatever facility you want to build.
Okay. Okay, I would have expected it to be more than start from scratch, but that's
Anymore.
correct. Okay,
Not anymore.
okay. All right, interesting. Thank you.
There was, I think one of the participants, or maybe John, mentioned at your symposium that at least up in New England, there's been quite interest over the last couple of years, especially of people buying up old farmsteads and renovating them, converting them for housing and using the outbuildings for whatever the case may be. But have you seen that kind of trend at all?
Yeah, I have, because we've had people moving from the city, out to the country, and some people with quite a bit of money. They've come in and they've spent whatever it took to bring that barn around, and they have a real stewardship mentality. And some of these have sold businesses in the city. They've sold, things to do with computers and things. They've had these big businesses, and now they've moved up to New Hampshire. And it's been, kind of neat to see people with money that can do this. It's been sad to see some of our farms chopped up because the dairy industry has declined. But there have been these people picking up these subdivided homesteads and putting pretty significant funds into fixing up the buildings.
And a lot of times what's really strange is, typically I do a lot of assessments. I look at probably between 75 and 100 buildings a year. And typically what happens is, before they buy it, they call me and I'll do a 3-hour walkthrough with them just to get a sense of where they're headed. Now they're just buying these things almost sight unseen, and then coming in and afterwards and say, can you come tell me what I need to do or what I should do? There's that much of an influx of people moving. And I think a lot of it has to do with the technology and be able to work remotely.
Yeah, we had a local, we had some real estate assessments done in this marketplace based on the particular properties that we're talking about here, and that analysis was pretty conclusive that these sites are not candidates for that. The micro locations would work against someone with means who's going to be a discriminating purchaser who can just go pretty much wherever they want. Would not go to these particular locations for residential use. There's micro issues with locations.
Okay.
Do you have kind of a central funding source or a group or something that's putting this together, or would raise funds to do something? Or are you trying to spin this off to somebody who would take this over?
Well, the property is owned by Lower Makefield Township. They bought the land and the buildings in 1998, and so now it's kind of at a crossroads where the township needs to make some decisions of investing in these buildings in combination with nonprofits or public grant money, etc., or just what to do. So it's some of the buildings are at a condition where it's time to fish or cut bait. And that's why the township decided to form this committee to kind of do a deep dive and make some recommendations for these properties.
So the properties were purchased for land protection more than building protection, I assume? Or-
That's been the behavior of the 221 acres. 183 have been deeded or have agricultural easements, so they're in perpetuity preserved as agricultural land. There is, some land around and amongst that with dwellings that doesn't have those easements, but it's an attractive farmsteads that kind of add a lot of character to our community that we want to see retained or preserved to the extent that that's feasible, reasonable. But as one of you said, I forget, maybe it was John, there needs to be a use and a steward that has the means to really take that over. And how deep into that the township government wants to go solo is to be determined.
Regardless
That's
what
part of our
happens,
analysis.
regardless what happens, would the town maintain the ownership of the buildings?
That's the default position, although we've been charged as a committee to look at all options, even a potential sale of portions to private interests. One of the farmsteads is already subdivided into about 5 and a fraction acres. That contains a house, barn, and some outbuildings. And that we had a real estate assessment done on that particular parcel, but it was deemed not suitable for residential. A residential investor who would want to put that kind of money in it. We're looking at some other commercial potential utilizations, maybe utilization by the township itself in terms of office space, meeting space, that type of use of the house and barn combination.
Yeah, we had I think the town of Durham in New Hampshire, down on the coast, and Steve knows this place. It's called Wagon Hill Farm.
Yeah.
And a well-known place that shows from the road. And for a short period of time, the town did put their offices in there. I think they've since moved out, and I think things are going downhill.
Okay.
If you decide to sell a barn with land around it, you can always, at least we can, I assume you guys can do the same thing. We can do preservation easements on properties to make sure that they don't put windows when they're not supposed to, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, if there were any such transaction, we've operated on the assumption that it would be with some historical preservation kinds of easements that would obligate the new owner to retain certain qualities and to limit what they can do, and that's certainly available in Pennsylvania.
Oh, good.
Is there a historical society that could get excited about any of this?
The township has a historical society and historical commission, and we've tapped into those organizations and have been dialoguing with them in terms of some plans. They're interested. There's not a lot of resources there, but they do have expertise that would help in grant writing and some stewardship type of expertise, and could lead some charges in terms of fundraising, public awareness. But it's still at the conversation stage, is how I would describe it.
Because we have 2 or 3 farms similar to what you described in New Hampshire that have become farm museums.
Mhm.
And fortunately, one of them was very well endowed. So they've got plenty of money to do whatever they want to do. The other one depends on membership and donations, and they're kind of limping along, but they've been in existence for probably 30 years as a farm museum. And then they brought in equipment and used the basement, put rock down and put some equipment in the basement. They put hand tools kind of by category upstairs, and they charge admission, and they have a whole series of educational programs that go on through the summer. And that's been a nice use. What I'm describing is the Farm Museum in Milton, New Hampshire. The one that's well endowed is the Remick Museum up in Tamworth, New Hampshire. And there's Makefield Farm up in Sutton, New Hampshire. And all those have kept going through kind of a museum membership support type of thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think even one of them, I think the Tamworth one for a while was experimenting with having their own CSA
Yeah.
Right.
there. So to help out with funding to keep the buildings going.
So
Right.
your experience is basically, find a steward and any of the uses that we've proposed would be viable.
Yeah, you've got to have somebody that really takes it on, loves the place, is going to really look after it. And then, of course, you need a money source. Money is always the bottom line.
Right.
And
Has the town shown any interest in partially funding any of the things that you're talking about doing?
Well, I think they're waiting for this committee to come back with some recommendations to get a sense of the magnitude of that funding that might be required. They certainly have expressed interest in supporting it. But when you start, carrying out decimal points and putting dollar signs in front of something, that's different. And there's a general sense of support, but we have to get down to some more specific proposals before we can quantify that.
Yeah,
Any state funding available?
probably.
Yeah, we think there are with grants. We have a local state, our state senator who is, supportive of these kinds of initiatives. So I think between the state, the county, and the local township, there will be funding. The question is the magnitude of that and the priorities of that. There's a number of priorities here, and everyone might have a different idea of what's on the top of the list.
John and Steve, are you familiar with how entities like a municipal entity wants to maintain ownership of the barn, but then lease it to a nonprofit, whatever that be, like an art agency, or historic organization or whatever? What can you say about those kinds of structural arrangements?
I have a kind of a reverse arrangement with a Strawberry Bank Museum in Portsmouth, where they had there's about 40 buildings that they got right during urban renewals. The first urban renewal project, I believe, in the country, where they didn't actually tear the buildings down. They actually saved buildings, but there were 9 buildings that hadn't been taken care of very well. And so what they decided to do at this point, after 50 years or 60 years, was to see if they could find people who would help take care of the buildings. The downstairs floors would continue to be museum space. The second floors were rented out as apartments. And the intent was to have the apartments pay for the ongoing maintenance for that particular building. Now that changed after a while. They decided to put it in a big pot because there were some projects that needed more money than others. But they asked me if I was interested in doing a long-term lease with them, putting in some money into a project, doing a long-term lease. At the end of the lease, they get the building back and do whatever they want to with it. So there are different structures that you can do. I'm trying to think of a town that there are towns who lease buildings.
How long a lease is a long-term lease?
It can be anywhere from 30 years to 99 years. That's certainly it.
And then the nonprofit or the tenant then makes the structural or improvements on the property.
Can in lieu of payments, yes. Yeah, in lieu of buying anything. They just have the stewardship piece of it and maintain and do it themselves.
Well,
And
Steve,
there are checks and balances when that happens though too. They have to meet. I had to meet certain deadlines over a 3-year period to get this done, so that I could then have control over it for 30 more years.
you don't use it like a summer place or something? Don't you go there in the summer?
Yeah. There's 2 apartments. We rent one upstairs, which basically takes care of all of the work that was done there. And then we have a space that we use for ourselves, and go there in the summertime or whatever, and let family use.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Fred, Steve, and John, I really appreciate this discussion. I'm just noticing it's 7 minutes after 8. We do have a busy agenda. Are there other questions from committee members first, and then also both Steve and John? Is there any thing that you really want to tell a group like this that you haven't said yet?
Well, all I can say is if you can find a pressing use, that's going to make a lot of things happen, so I think you can be creative in needs that town might have, or historical society might have, or a museum might have, or an arts group. If you get a pressing need, I think that will drive it, but you've got to have a need and a pressing goal, or you won't get the excitement. I guess that's what I'd want to say. Steve?
Yeah, I agree with John wholeheartedly. The other thing is too, it does take someone as a lead to really be the leader and push this through. And I do want to thank you and congratulate you on at least going through this process to try to save buildings. It's up to the local people, the local town people, to save things. You can get help from other people, but it's up to you guys to really get things started and really get it out there that you do want to save these buildings and for future use.
Our like sound advice. Any questions from committee members that for our guests?
And I.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you both, and thank you, Fred, for the introductions, and I'm sure Fred can follow up if there's if you have brainstorms or we have brainstorms. We'd like to keep the dialogue open.
Yeah, and if you get to the point where you'd like to see some photographs of some things that have been done, and reuse activities, contact John and/or I, and we'll get you some of those to look at least.
Right.
Get a sense of it. So.
Okay.
And keep us in the loop. Yeah, I think Steve and I are both personally interested in these kind of things. So, feel free to keep us in the loop.
Yes,
thank
please
you.
do.
We appreciate your interest and value your experience and expertise. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Have a good evening.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for
John.
including us.
Steve.
Thanks.
Thank you now.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right. Fred Childs, thank you for that, for setting that up. That's it's good discussion. The next agenda item is the facilities assessment, the renovation cost estimates and structural analysis that the township sponsored, and they hired James of RV Engineering. We've seen that report, and I think for the purposes of time, I don't think there's a need to necessarily present that, Andrew or James, from scratch, but more to maybe answer some questions that the committee has, so that we're properly interpreting the analysis and the conclusions, and so that we're looking at it the right way. For example, James, one question, I mean, because it's on the barns, just to build from that bridge, I saw in your report you were making the assumption that it would be stacked with hay, and 3 bales high, with a bale weighing, I forget what your assumption was, 90 pounds, I want to say. That is not quite the utilization. It would be straw, not hay. Straw is much lighter. I've thrown bales of both for years. And it would certainly be a lot higher than 3 bales high. We're talking about 20, 30
Right.
feet.
Now
So
that's,
I want to understand the assumptions that go into the calculations.
sure. So one bale is like 2.5 feet by 1.5 feet, and it weighs 20 pounds per square foot.
Okay.
The building would be rated if the entire floor plan between beds 3 and 6 of the Cedar Thwaite farm, were if every square foot was stacked 3 bales high, which is equal to 60, 3 bales high equals 60 PSF.
Okay.
That if you were to go to 80, it doesn't rate. That was my logic. And just kind of cutting it off at 3, i.e. 60 PSF for the entire floor plan. And that's just a dead load. That's also counting a 30 PSF live load. And of course, those 2 loads aren't going to occur simultaneously in the same spot. But for the sake of structural analysis, that's how you calculate that.
So is your analysis consistent with the intended use by the farmer of the second floor, where you have large mows, hay mows, on each side of the center corridor where the barn hill, where you enter the second floor, that's stacked with straw, and they're parking equipment, farm equipment, in the center of the floor, in that center corridor with straw on each side. So that's the application, and I'm certainly no engineer, and I believe you if you say that 60 psi is right, fine. But it is, I just want to say it that plainly, would that be okay? Will the building withstand that utilization?
I could quickly answer it if I just knew the weight of the machinery and where it'd be placed. Off the top of my head, if it were, again, to stay within the east side of the building between beds 3 and 6, we have much more closely spaced columns, uniformly tightly spaced columns. Yes, it can hold that weight. 60 PSF across the entire floor plan is a lot of weight.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I just knew the exact type of equipment, or they could just give me the pounds, the weight of it, I could answer that quickly.
Okay. All right. I don't want to get too caught up on that, but that, being sure that one of the barns can be used as a barn is a goal.
The Cedar Thwaite barn is in better shape to perform.
I'm sorry, would you say Cedar Thwaite barn would be
the better option?
Yeah. Clearly, from what I read, it seemed to be. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. Committee, other questions on the engineering reports that we received with the cost estimates?
I just want to know over to the scope of RVE that if we do get the specs and we can shoot them over to him, could he get us a response in a timely, 48-hour, 72-hour response window?
I'm sorry, what's the question? The question is, if you have additional questions and you want to write them out and send them over to us, can we respond to those questions within 48 hours?
I don't know what your contract states. So what do we still have that ability, and what would be the turnaround time, I guess would be the question.
Well, we're the township engineer. So we, the only thing that I can say is we would respond to those questions diligently. I don't know that 48 hours would be something that we would promise, but because without knowing what the questions are, it might take a little bit more digging through the existing information that we have on the facilities. But it's not like something where we would put the questions aside for weeks on end and then get to them when we get to them. No, we would be diligent in responding.
And obviously, we would need to go through Kurt and Jim through the township with any questions like that.
Correct.
I have a question on the caretaker house. One of the items is the repair of the first floor framing system. I presume that's the flooring underneath the flooring, the stuff in the basement that you're going to read.
Yes, the floor beams. Yeah.
Thank you, beams. That's the word I was looking for. So when you do that, is that a replacement of wood structures or is that an installation of steel? And since this would be the historical place, is there a consideration of historically correct reinforcements?
So you could repair or replace. You could repair it by sistering the existing beam.
Mhm.
That would be the cheaper option. You'd have to remove and cut out and have a sound bearing area at the top of the foundation wall to properly sister it. To replace it, you could temporarily jack the house, remove the existing timber beams, and then I can't quite answer the historical question, aspect of the question, but you could certainly put back. You only really need timber beams. You don't need steel for that short span.
Thank you.
And what method was included in your cost estimate? When we look at that cost estimate, did you have sistering in there or replacement? What?
I have like it would be kind of a liberal jacking of the house and replacement, not repair.
Replace, not repair.
Replacement, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I quite frankly was impressed with how low the costs were for repairs of the caretaker house. That's, I think your estimate was $53,000.
Yeah, because it's only half or a third of the floor plan where the framing would need to be replaced, and it's a much smaller floor plan.
Yeah,
and
I think it also highlights something for the committee as we look at these various estimates, which is your estimate of $53,000 in this particular case is the necessary structural repairs to that building.
Yeah.
It's not a renovation. It's not a restoration. It's a repair for the structure. Am I saying that in lay terms accurately?
Yeah, for the most part, we do have a line item in there for painting of exterior.
Well, yeah.
We have a line item in there for electrical work, but there's other work that may be required as well, plumbing, heating, things like that.
Yeah, most of the cost is purely structural.
Purely structural, right. And so we've received estimates for, restoration of that particular dwelling, for example, and that's orders of magnitude greater than 53,000. What is that? 300? Who has
Three times as much.
350? What
It's
is it?
150 to 350.
Between 150 and 350,000 to restore it. That's to restore it to its historical, standards, which is, and it just, so as we look at these different estimates, the committee has to keep in mind what's behind each one in terms of whether it's applicable to what we might recommend doing versus what has to be done right now just because it needs some repair. So, okay. Is that the same that's the same consideration for the slack house, I take it? It was repairs and bringing it to usable condition. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Not quite. Some more consideration went to the slack and Cedar Fleet house for that matter. Those are renovation costs, both structural and then everything that would go into it to get it to a point where it can host events or be a commercial or retail space.
Those are renovation.
Yeah, I mean, it would be significantly if you were just concerned about the first floor not caving in, didn't care about the rest of the house. The cost would be significantly cheaper.
Right.
So
Yeah,
for
that-
instance, with the Slack House, we had items in there like installing bathroom sink, vanity cabinet, toilet, bathroom work, forced air HVAC work, painting.
Yeah, a big chunk of it would be like removing all the plaster walls, restudding, running electric, putting new drywall in. And also a big chunk of that cost estimate is the replacement of existing windows and window sills, just because they're not really functioning and not energy efficient. If you wanted to have that building to host events, you just need properly functioning windows.
Yeah. That estimate is your estimate for the Slack House is $916,000. And we'll have to look at exactly what that does include versus what it might need for its ultimate end use that we might recommend. So that's just a distinction that we need to wrestle with. Other questions from the committee as you looked at the
I have a question.
RV report? Yes.
The widening of the driveway on Planters Lane. I believe in your report, you did not expand the culvert. Is that correct?
The cost estimate, yes, reflects the widening without extending the length of the culvert. Yes.
Okay, why?
Well, simply because it'd be a lot more to excavate entirely, remove the existing culvert, put a new one in. Then you gotta, in addition to doing that, because if you really wanted to go 24 feet wide, you'd have to relocate all the utility poles along the length of the side of the driveway.
You couldn't
I mean,
do
I-
it just to the north side. You couldn't do an expansion directly.
You could, if you were to go all the way to the north side, then you start encroaching on the cornfields. I thought we were trying to avoid
Yes, but
that.
those happen to be the cornfields that aren't preserved yet either. So
Okay.
I guess
I'm asking because it just seems like you've got a pinch in the road now that you've in the design.
Right, and we considered that, and we believe that there are plenty of places where the existing bridge or existing underpass of a train, a railroad crossing is too narrow to handle 2-lane traffic, and you have signs at either end that says, wait here.
Yeah.
One lane bridge, 1-lane
Yeah.
tunnel, things like that. And I believe that even with an ultimate end use of having these buildings fully functioning, you wouldn't get the amount of traffic that would warrant needing 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction at that pinch point. So,
Okay, at that pinch point where the culvert is are the ponds. And it obviously takes a lot of the runoff from the farm, so it does flood. Is that area considered a wetland? Do you know? Are there any other environmental considerations there?
It's a stream. I don't know in that it carries a perennial flow. I don't know that it's wetlands per se, but yeah, that would any work done to that culvert could be considered maintenance on the existing culvert from DEP standpoint. If you are expanding the culvert or increasing the size of it, then that would require a permit from DEP.
Okay, but the ponds have no special environmental designation that preserves them in any capacity.
Well, the township ordinance considers them as areas to be preserved. They would
Yeah.
be considered.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah, it's a sensitive area, clearly. The ponds are important in the
Oh, yeah.
drainage. But I guess, yeah, I didn't realize the plan called for a 2-lane driveway that is actually 1 lane wide at one spot in the middle. Okay.
Well, so, 1 lane wide, I don't want to give it the wrong impression. What, Jim, do you know off the top of your head what the width of the driveway would be at the culvert?
18 feet.
Okay, so it's 18 feet. So it's not, when we think of highway lanes we typically think, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet.
12, yeah, 12, yeah.
So this would be a little bit wider than that.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Jim, John, Sarah? Any,
I'm good for now. Thank you.
okay. Okay, James,
Good, thanks.
I'm good, thank you.
we really do appreciate the township's response when we asked for these assessments, and particularly like the weight loading capacities of the barns and things, not that long ago. And so Andrew, you and Kurt were very responsive, and we appreciate it very much. It's important input to the analysis we're trying to wrestle to the ground here.
Yeah, that's not lost on us. We appreciate the township reaching out to us, and look forward to answering any other questions that you might have along the way.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, thank you. Thank you. If there's nothing else for our guests, James and Andrew, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
The fifth agenda item is some discussion of the Slack House proposal. I had told the committee that Spirit Golf was readying a proposal for us. The concept at Slack House that's been bantied about because of its micro location on the golf course or on the driveway of the golf course, and from the Spaziano real estate assessment, it's not suitable location for private residents. That some event space, restaurant, event venue kind of space. So I literally got that proposal since our meeting started here, since 7:30. So I've glanced at it. I will distribute it to everyone after the meeting. But I think the long and one of the considerations is that the Slack House is an expensive undertaking to renovate, to bring to usable condition for an event space or a restaurant space. I think what is the estimate that we got from, I'm just trying to pull it up here. The estimate we got,
916,000 from the engineers.
it was 916 from the engineers, but it was a lot.
860 to 1.5 from Worthington.
Thank you. 860 to 1.5 million. One of the issues that we'll see, and we can analyze this a little later, but let's say, for example, if that were a restaurant, if it requires an investment of $1.5 million and you get an operator in there to operate that, and they're going to have to share those profits with two entities that property owner, the township, and the restaurant operator, you need a lot of volume throughput from a place like that in order to get an attractive ROI for two entities. And I think that's some of the thinking behind Spirit Golf's idea of if they can invest, and they seem to be willing to. And again, I'll send this proposal, and I've literally glanced at it, but they're willing to invest to build an event facility for 250 people. They think that there is a way to carve out space for parking, etc. That all needs to be assessed. But this old historic stone Bucks County home, if restored, would be the bridal suite and a place for the bridal party to gather. And it would be kind of as they say, the bow on the package that would sell a successful event venue there at Makefield Highlands, which would be a source of revenue for the township for a long time. Let's take a look at their proposal. It's a conceptual proposal. It's not detailed. They're not trying to spell out years of lease or anything like that. But we can kick that around when we have a chance to look at it. And particularly, John and Jim, this is kind of in your sweet spot, your bailiwick with project management and commercial real estate. So be very interested in your assessment of it. But that's about as much as we have to say until we have a chance to digest what we just received today. Other thoughts or comments just on the subject of the Slack House at this juncture? I actually, after going through that house, I was a little bit pleased that the number came in at $1.5 million. I was nervous that it would be even bigger than that. So not that isn't big, but I thought it might have been bigger. The outline for the presentation for our final report, if we're to wrap this up in the month of February and present it to Fred and his colleagues on the Board of Supervisors at the March 2nd meeting, I distributed an outline that I thought was a draft that we could use to begin to fill in. It was an email a couple days ago. I haven't heard anything back, so I'd like the committee to discuss that draft and give some reactions if we can. None?
Done.
Dennis, I thought it was great. I think it was concise, it hit all the points, so no comments.
My only question was with some of the recommendations. Do we want to provide multiple recommendations, possible recommendations for use for the Board of Supervisors? Because obviously we're not coming up with the final plan. They're the ones who get to decide. I mean, I'm just looking at some of even some of the outhouse buildings.
I think it's reasonable. I mean, some of these questions are more difficult than others, and to think that there is one and only one recommendation is probably naive. I would like us to kind of stick our necks out and say this is our number one recommendation, and maybe there is a fallback or there's an alternative. But if the situation warrants, and if we feel as a committee, hey, that we need to push for this, or this is clearly the best, then I'd like to see us put that foot forward, but also recognize that there are, there's going to be more than one version. So yeah, I'm very open to kind of providing more than one in the appropriate circumstances. I mean, like the Slack House. I mean, maybe a restaurant is best. Maybe an event venue is second best, or I don't. So yeah, I think that's appropriate. I have no issue with that. Is that what are the rest of you feeling?
I like that idea. I think if we give multiple options, they can see the different points of view and the different possibilities. Obviously, some of them are going to be more attractive than others to the town council. So I think multiple options will give them some additional advice.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Dennis, I might add, maybe just keep it standing is an option. And I kind of differentiate between preservation or rehab, but just do the structural necessary to keep it the way it is now.
And I do think that in some cases may be a recommendation, right? I mean, I don't think the budgets are going to be there to necessarily do everything to every building that we would want, and in some cases there'll have to be priorities taken and say, hey, in phase one, let's be sure we do these 4 things, and then in a later stage, this is what we would do with the next 4 or whatever. And there may be some that, yeah, keep it mothballed and prevent it from deteriorating further. Could be an option for some. We all know without a use, the building is dead, and it's no coincidence that the 2 buildings in the best shape are the 2 buildings that have been used. It's the Janney House, now the Joseph Yardley House, as we'll call it, and the caretaker cottage, or the what is it, John Tunnicliffe, John Tunnicliffe cabin. And they're in respectable shape because they've been used, and we need to have these buildings used, or why are we spending money? But I think it's a good point, John. Stabilize, and for now could well be a choice.
My concern is that we need to make it clear to the township that a lot of these estimates were done at least a couple of years ago and are really only aimed at the most critical repairs, and it's not really bringing them up to any real condition of usability. And that if they don't do these things, at least this as a bare minimum, then things will just continue to deteriorate and get worse. So it needs to be clear that, yeah, it's going to cost some money, whether it comes from the township or some other source. But they need to realize that a lot of these things have been not been done over the years. Obviously, they have done enough to preserve the roofs and basic structure, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to ensure that they're not just going to deteriorate further and eventually just fall apart.
Agree, and I think the engineering assessment, facilities assessment that we just saw is a prime example of that. I mean, the John Tunnicliffe house, $53,000 to repair things, but I think it's realistic to say that it's over $300,000 or in the $300,000 range to actually restore that. that's a historical gem, the oldest house in our township, maybe the oldest house in Bucks County, one of the oldest houses in Pennsylvania. If there's a gem in this crown historically, that is clearly it. And if there's a building that should be restored as opposed to renovated, that would certainly be it. And the fact that it's relatively small and relatively in good shape helps make it more affordable as well. But we've had way too many cost estimates that are just the cost to repair, not the cost to make it usable. And I think we want the buildings to be usable. Otherwise, what are we doing? If it's not used, it's just gonna start going in reverse again. Yeah. Okay. So I'd like the committee to think about taking on some sections of this table of contents. Take, look at that outline and think about what element A sub B or B or D you would like to write, take responsibility for. I mean, we'll all be responsible and we'll all review it all and agree in the end. But we do need the committee to begin drafting. And I find that if you start writing things down and trying to explain it in writing, it's very rich, because you'll realize, oh, here's a piece of information I actually need and I don't have, and let me go get it. So I think it'll be a productive process to begin drafting. So I'm not asking anybody to raise their hand right now on Zoom and say I'll take A, B, C, D, whatever. But give that some thought. Realistically, what you can afford to devote some time to, and because I think we can eat this elephant one bite at a time if we divide up the drafting.
There's a lot of it already drafted in between. I mean, it's just putting it into a narrative. Is that what you want, instead of the tables that we've already prepared and looked at?
Yeah, I think that's largely true. It's putting it into a narrative that says, here are the options we looked at. Here's why that one, here's what's against that one. Here's the pros and cons of this one. And when you shake it all down, we're recommending this is the best option for A, B, C, D. Yeah, it's not a start from scratch, but we do need to begin to get the to get the verbiage down, and then we can circulate drafts and homogenize and revise as we need to. But I think it would be a productive thing to do as we get ready to touch the beginning of February here.
Are you thinking we'll just do I know a written report would be first, but then you'd want, when we're ready to go to the Board of Supervisors, you want a presentation?
Yes, we want a presentation. I've also taken a kind of I've begun a cut at that, kind of following this, but it's not ready for prime time yet. But we'll want the written report, and then we'll want the PowerPoint, because that's what we'll be going over on March 2nd in detail. So if it's easier for if somebody wants to sign up for a particular part, if you feel better, starting with the PowerPoint and then going to text, or vice versa, I don't care. It's we have a lot of heads and a lot of hands, and I think we can get it done if we divide it up in an intelligent way.
And I think you started, way back, Dennis, I think at the beginning, you've got the maybe the core background of some presentations that you put together that that would help
Okay,
lay out the story initially, at least.
okay. Yeah, I'll get out kind of a draft of I build off of a presentation that the township has made with the Lower Makefield Township format of green borders and just just kind of pirating or lifting that. And I'll get I have some introductory slides and some things to kind of get started with. And the the drafts that we've circulated here, we've commented back and forth. Please keep kicking those around and pushing back and challenging. We need to all feel confident in the final recommendations. So I think that'll be and if we all contribute and push back on each other, that's a productive way of getting it done.
And Jim Majewski's presentation as well at
Yes.
The first beginning of the meeting, and then we have possibly some stuff we can pull out of Jeff Marshall's information.
Yeah, and Jim Majewski had a lot of photographs. I know Bet has a lot of photographs. So if we need, if we do have a pretty decent library to choose from to tell some of those tales. That's fine. There's more photographs in this January report from RV engineers that are all useful for telling the story. Okay.
Fred Weiss, when we tell this story, how longer do you think we'd have?
The $1 a minute. I think you guys know what you're going to present. I would keep it to 15 minutes at the most. So, if there's a problem with that, just let me know and I'll coordinate it with the town, with the chair, who's also my co-liaison. So, I think you guys are, you're hitting this nail pretty good. We're all looking forward to the presentation on the second.
Would you prefer less history and less pictures and more of the more focus on recommendations?
Yeah, you're talking to the board. We know what's going on. I mean, if for the residents, it might be good to touch on the history of the properties, but your job is to make recommendations to the board of supervisors, and I would center around to getting the job done, and I'll let you author the presentation any way you see fit, knowing the basic parameters. We want to get some recommendations in and some preliminary decisions made so we can progress and save these buildings.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, that'll be. I don't want to tell you how much it's going to cost you a minute. If it's only 15 minutes, it's going to be expensive. Get ready.
I'm already paying.
Okay. All right. Ladies, gentlemen, other business. Any topics that anyone on the committee wants to raise or bring up? Chair.
Was it Jim Scott? Are you the real estate person?
Yes.
Okay. I asked our friends from New Hampshire about lease agreements and that sort of thing. Have you been working on that in that area about those kinds of arrangements?
Yes. Yeah. So we're very, very familiar with the agreements, and there's some general guidelines, but it really is case specific. I mean, this is kind of outside. I can point us towards what some of the pitfalls are but it's a kind of unique situation that, we're not starting with the new and modern buildings. So a lot of the expectations between landlord and tenant on repairs and maintenance are going to be a little bit, skewed from what you might find in other leases. And of course, the other aspect is typically the landlord, their obligation to themselves or their shareholders is to maximize the revenue, which again is not entirely consistent with what the township's doing. So, any specific concerns?
Something we're wrestling with our interest in the pack house is how to how long a lease do you need in order to get grants for that as a nonprofit? Do you need a 30-year, 99-year? I don't know. We have no idea what sort of arrangements would be needed in that kind of a setting. If who makes the repairs, at what point township does X and we do Y. I don't know. So that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, so I think it's something you should just look at, not the 5-year, but the 10+ year range. And it depends, and it should be reflected in the lease rate. So if it's a lease where the tenant does everything under the sun, it's different than lease rate where the landlord's coming in to service the HVAC a few times a year. So it really can be the full spectrum.
Okay, thank you.
John, you were looking at possible contractors that do barn timber reuse. I sent you I don't know if you saw it. There was another firm that I think started out in Princeton that's over in Jersey. Not sure where they are right now, but
I did reach out to Heartland, and Heartland said pretty much what Jeff had said last time, that they'll come and take the wood for free, and then that way they would dismantle the building, and we would not have to pay them to do that, but then they would take the wood as payment. It's kind of a barter-like situation, so it's a cost avoidance for the township.
Dennis, since I guess we're at other business or other.
Yeah.
I had mentioned one time before, there's a local resident who has restored his property very close to Patterson. He's amenable to have us visit, and I suggested possibly the weekend of February 5th, I think Saturday or Sunday. So if anybody's interested, I'll send some more details to the group afterwards. So if anybody's interested, maybe we can make that visit as well.
Yeah, I think that would be useful for sure. Also, just a bit of an update. I've been talking a lot to Tim and Sam Stewart of Charland Farms. As I know, as we've said, that this Patterson farm is, after all, about agriculture and staying into farming, and we want to be sure that that if there are uses for the buildings that the current farmer can make productive use of, that ranks real high, and I'm going to be hopefully before in the next few days, I'm going to be walking the property with Sam and Tim. We're trying to come up with an hour where we can look at the buildings in some detail. They know that right now the Satterswaith barn is likely to be the barn where they could park equipment and store straw. That has an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that would put their activity further away from some of the more public activities at the Patterson farmstead. They're They're some distance away. The downside to that is they're some distance away. All of their produce, vegetables are grown back behind the Tunnicliff cabin, between there and the greenhouses and the woods. Because if they put it on the road, people would help themselves. So it's all buried back there. So that's they're back there a lot. Satterswaite is a bit of a distance, not as convenient, but nevertheless, it's probably the best option. There are some other buildings that they could make use of. Maybe the well house on Satterswaite. That's in pretty decent condition. Certainly the concrete building behind the Satterswaite barn that the township now has a big brine sprayer truck stored in there. That's a potential. The well house is a potential. On Patterson, that P7 that we call the equipment garage is a potential interest. So I'm going to go out there with them, and we're going to try to nail those things down. And the thought is that if by getting clarity, right now the way it's been run is kind of a general understanding that if they could use a building, they should, but they're worried about getting in the township's way. The township's worried about getting in their way. And so we want to make it clear, build it into at least this is your building to use. You're going to help contribute to the maintenance. You put the lock and key on it, if Sam or Tim, and the township will leave it alone, and it's yours, and then you'll leave the other ones alone. So we're trying to get some of that clarity. So I'm going to go out there with them. Anybody's welcome. When we come up with a time, I'll let the committee know. And you're welcome to be part of that tour and conversation. What else? Any other?
That on the Tunnicliff cabin, if the artist that's there now was relocated, would they need bathroom, kitchen type facilities?
As far as I know, yes.
That's what they have today.
Yes.
So if in fact that cabin goes that direction, that the Board of Supervisors wants to do that, then we'd have to work out with that tenant, some other alternative. The lease is month to month. It's not a long-term lease. So either party, can make a change. That doesn't mean you want to just do it abruptly. It would take some planning and some communications. But I'm sure it's a manageable situation when we get to it. That's what I would expect. So,
And in our costs, are we including the dendrochronology studies in order to actually date the beams?
to my knowledge, we are not. I mean, I think, James, this is your bailiwick, but I thought there was a combination of the historical committee and maybe preserve Patterson farm.
Oh, that's right,
Group
that they were gonna pay for that.
They had a professor and an organization who was willing to do that. And of course we would welcome that kind of information. But we weren't including any costs from the township's perspective because they said they were doing it. Do I have that right, James?
They said they would be willing to do it, but they,
okay.
would need the permission, of course. But yeah, that's as far as I know the case.
James, I don't know if Are you familiar with that technology and whether it really would be appropriate? I suspect that what they need to do is compare the coarse samples that they get with other samples that are similar in presumably this region to see where they can age it to. And is that the only firm that does that?
I mean, I don't think that there's only one place that would be able to do that. But I think that if they are willing to work with us for this, and obviously we would need to sort that out. But again, that's just something that we would need to mention to the committee as being an option, and not something that we would have to organize right this second. If I'm correct on that, Dennis.
Okay. They're probably moving on. Dennis, you there?
I'm here, yep.
Okay.
If there's no other business, I would suggest we open up the meeting for public comment. Erica, is there any?
Yes, we have,
public comment?
yep, we have one public comment. Kathleen, I'll bring her in right now.
Thank you.
Okay, Kathleen's in the room with us.
Hello.
Hi, Kathleen. This is Dennis Stedman.
Hi.
You have the committee here and Fred Weiss from the Board of Supervisors. How are you?
Okay, good. Do I need to give my address or anything?
What's your last name, Kathleen?
Kathleen Herco, and I'm at 1450 Dolington Road. And I just have a few comments. I've been waiting patiently for public comment. One is just my understanding is that the committee was formed to try to figure out the future use for the structures and the repairs needed on the structures. Is that right?
Yeah, that's generally right. To make recommendations to the township, the owner of the property, on what uses they can make of the buildings that would help justify the expensive repairs that are necessary in some cases.
Okay, I'm a little confused why we were talking about putting in a 2-lane driveway on the farm. Like, why would we spend money on a driveway when we're talking about fixing structures? I was a little confused about that whole conversation.
Well, one of the things that we're looking at when we look at getting some community use, some utility from the structures, is using the Joseph Yardley House as an anchor for an art center, which is there now and been successful and growing rapidly in the last couple of years, and having that kind of public use without causing problems with or interference with the farmer. We are considering looking at some site improvements. I mean, right now it's a spattering of buildings and barns and homes that were made sense hundreds of years ago when they were built, and then we have some tenants just kind of walking in there and using them as they are, and the township walking in there and using them like they are, and the farmer walking in there and using them like they are. And I think if we step back and say, what's the farmer need? What's the township need? What would a public space need? There's probably a little better way we could organize some of that, just a site plan to help let the community have access to maybe an historical building like the Tunnicliffe cabin or the Joseph Yardley house, and not interfere with the farm. Maybe maybe the site needs some demarcation with a split rail fence to kind of separate from the crops and tell people to please stay on this side of the fence. And so some site improvements are being thought about, and amongst that would be that rather long driveway, which is a single lane and can be awkward at times. So just that's what's behind it. Is there
Okay.
a way to organize some space?
I do understand it, but I do believe that it's kind of, that should be more of a later on thing, that the structures are really what's important right now, in my opinion. Get those stable, and talking about roads and stuff like that should be kind of after all the improvements are done. But that's just my opinion on that. And I just wanted to say that I think it's wonderful that you're meeting with the farmers. I fully support the Stewarts, and I feel like this town really needs them to keep farming, and anything we could do to support them would be great. And I came in a little late, so I didn't get the background of your experts at the beginning. But when they did talk about people in the town, a group, the historical society, people getting involved, I just wanted to put on record and remind everybody that there is a nonprofit group, Patterson Farm Preservation, that is insured. And my husband happens to be the president of it. We renovated our home. It's 1820. We had similar, it was empty for 10 years. We had a similar issue like Satterway, where the main beam of the house had to be replaced, which we did. We had to raise the house up and put the beam in. I just wanted to, remind people that there are people that want to work, that have insurance, that have the credentials. We have this historic society that Helen Hines is willing to write grants. If I think that you could get a lot of people in the township. I know some tradespeople that said they would volunteer their electrical, plumbing, their expertise, if allowed, to restore the home. So I just wanted to put that out there and remind people that there are groups that want to help out. And then one more thing about the when you talked about the barn, taking the barn or the buildings down for barnwood, I would hate to see that, but if you're going to let someone take it down for free, again, we have experience with that. We could keep it local. We could take it down for you. My husband's a licensed contractor. Just throwing all that out there to keep it local and, let people get involved in this. It belongs to the township, and it's an important part of our township to a lot of people. So I just wanted to get that on record, that there are people that want to help.
Well, that's great to hear, and it's not news. I am aware of that, Kathleen, but thank you for saying it again. And
sure.
I know your organization has offered to help, and we'll take any interested. Happy to have the help of anyone in the community that's interested, has the the wherewithal, the means to contribute. That's going to be kind of at that execution stage. We're at the the conceptual stage, and then we got some planning to do, and as a board of supervisors, the township gets their arms around it, it'll be execution. And that's where whether it's groups in the community and talented plumbers or carpenters maybe can get involved. That's good to hear. And
okay, and if the farmer does get the barn and leases it, we'll be all in to help him fix the barn also.
Okay.
We'll do whatever we can to get those buildings, to keep them standing.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Okay, thank you for letting me just, I've been waiting to talk, and I just wanted to let you know that there are people that care and that want to get involved.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Erica, are there any other public comment?
Yes, we had a couple more call in. I can bring Laura into the room now. And Laura's in the room with us now.
Good evening. Thank you for this time. I know it's been a long evening, but I'm one of those people who've been a passive observer of this for years and years, riding by on seeing Patterson Farms. So knowing that this has come to such a point after 24 years of it being in a limbo is critical to me. And I want to just put out there that a cohesive thread that would bring together these multiple uses that are being talked about, to me, is what I feel like is missing. I agree with you that a building has to have a life and it has to thrive and has to be used. But once you touch the integrity of a spot such as Patterson Farms, there's the threat that you're going to lose what is there right now. If somebody dismisses the ponds, or somebody dismisses the Southerthwaite because it's not looking good, even though it's a frame house that has been neglected for years, there is this opportunity. We're on the brink of it. And I just feel that before we dole out finding possibly the golf course wanting to use one building for a venue, we have to look at what the community can bring in. All those are sources of revenue. If you tie in universities, if you tie in the state, if you tie in historical, it can be the community that really birthed the whole Patterson Farm, that's been a community all by itself. Once you start taking away buildings, it loses the life that it had, even though it's been sort of in limbo for all these years. Just as an outsider looking at this and passing it, I feel so badly that people are so busy these days that they're not even focusing on what's at stake here and what you're going to be presenting to the board. And I've been watching these meetings, and I just feel this sense of panic that something I see and love is slipping away. I have no access to it. It's an open space, but as a person in the public, I can't walk the grounds. I can't put up a sign that says, call this number if you want to save this. There's nothing to be done in that sense, other than I'm calling in and telling you that, people, if they knew that what's at stake in front of them is going to disappear or be radically altered, the spirit of a farm in a community that has its historical roots, it just is, it's a sad thing to contemplate. So I hope there can be a thread, and I hope, as we said in one of the speakers said in December, nobody in Bucks County would want to look and see all of a sudden a parking lot taking over and cars and the vista interrupted. The purpose of this land was farming. These buildings had a purpose. Some of them have been, weathered and in disrepair. But I do agree with the past caller saying the community could rally and surprise everyone with how they could contribute and have their name connected with a future that will live beyond them. And that's what, a restaurant comes and goes. How many breweries can one have? How many venues can one have a pretty wedding at for some people who can afford that? But for the rest of the community, you have people, in colleges, you have people with schools, visits, field trips, education. There are towns that transplant buildings to make a faux village. Here you have a historic farm, and it just it would be a nice opportunity to see. And when I hear it in bits and spurs through the conversation, that's the ideal, that we would like to, keep this, it gives me a little encouragement. But, I don't want to see the Solder Swipe become an office building. There are office buildings that need to be used, that exist. This has a greater purpose. And if, just as you've suggested, stabilizing might be the first course of action, because you're making big decisions now, but it's been harboring for 24 years. Here we're on the edge of it. I just hope that we take that time that we've missed maybe earlier and not repairing, to give this an opportunity, and maybe look for that connecting thread that brings in all these pieces, so that you do really have a community farm and a community wanting to preserve this land and this open space, so that they can take advantage of it in whatever shape or form, whether it's through a museum, through a university, through a school, that there's that venue, that this isn't something we just see from our car, that maybe we'll be able to have even an annual day, a weekend, where it is open to the public to walk the grounds that you see. It would just be a lovely opportunity. And that's what I want to leave you with, just to know that people on the outside are looking at this, and if they don't know it, they surely would want to. And I hope we'll find a way to communicate that more, so that you get the feedback. And I thank you. It's a big task ahead of you. And I just hope the community will rally and speak out in favor of the preservation that I hope will be the spirit of Lower Makefield and all of us in Bucks County, because it affects all of us. And I thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I thought, you expressed yourself very, very nicely. And I mean, to be clear, this is open space. It's going to stay open space. It's preserved as farmland. We know it will continue as farmland. It's preserved in perpetuity.
Right, with the 40 acres that we're looking at now, that these structures are at risk. Yeah, and I know that's what's being discussed.
Yes, exactly. And trying to figure out the best way to, as you say, to keep a building alive, to help justify its repairs, because it is expensive now because of the length of time that's gone on.
Yes.
But we hear you, and I thought it was very well expressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Good night.
Erica?
I can bring Emily in now.
Thank you.
And Emily's in the room with us now.
Okay.
Hello,
Hi,
Emily. Yes.
Hi. Okay, I know it's very late, so I'm going to be very quick. And I think Laura actually expressed most of what I was going to say anyway, so I can cut to the chase. Just to piggyback on everything she said, I hope we can consider the integrity of the land. I have the pleasure of living right across from Patterson Farm, and I think one thing that may get overlooked is the amount of wildlife. So I work from home, and I look out the window every day, and there's an incredible amount of wildlife on that property. And I do worry that with the section that is not preserved, that just becoming a parking lot or becoming whatever it is, I do think it'll be harder and harder to justify preserving the remaining farmland. And yes, it is preserved, but that does not mean it cannot be developed in the future. I sadly, like in my short life, grew up in New Jersey, and I've seen farmland after farmland in my short life get developed time and time again. So basically to the point where when I return back to my hometown, I don't even recognize it because there's no farmland left. And when we moved here, I pretty much thought to myself, like, there's no way this will stay preserved. But I just really hope you can keep doing what you're doing and try really hard to keep the integrity of the property, because as Helen Hines said, I think it was like 2 meetings ago in December, like, it's an incredible farm. It's like a 300-year-old farm, and putting a brewery there or a restaurant there, like that will come and go. And, that will become something else, and that will turn into, a Kohl's parking lot and a ShopRite and whatever. And I'm sorry if I'm being dramatic. I've seen it happen. And so I hope you do consider, the importance of preserving that land. And I also wanted to say, to a more tactical point, I know this has come up a few times, turning into a farming museum or some kind of agriculture museum. And I know that's not like a cash cow, like an event space would be. But I do think it's worth considering if you could potentially make the first floor of a property the farm museum and the second floor office space. I know there are younger generations that are interested in hobby farming. There's more interested in farming in general. And I think that would be a really nice thing to consider. And I know they have a couple I know maybe it's not comparable to New Hope or to New Hampshire, but I know there's a couple in New Hope. So it might be worth looking into if they are at all profitable. I'm sure they're not extremely profitable, but I just think it's something to look into. It is, like my husband said in the comments, it's a great property for a museum. And I do think there is some interest there. It would be great to have some community space and some educational space. I know it's not as easy as selling it to a developer for property or for commercial, any type of commercial real estate, but I think it would be worth the investment. But that is it. I will let you go. I know it's very late. So thank you.
No, thank you, Emily. We appreciate your interest and your comments, certainly. And I know there's the concern about the non-preserved space for roughly 38 acres or so. If you can see my screen, this. Yeah. Here's the Patterson farm. Here's our ugly greenhouses that are going down soon. The Patterson farmstead, this is Satterswaith farmstead. This is the driveway coming back to the Joseph Yardley house. Most of this land that is not agriculturally preserved, which is, this inside this space is not preserved in perpetuity in agriculture. Much of this is that wet ponds, streams area that very difficult to plant, or it's these farmsteads. And we know this is these are sensitive areas, and I don't envision this changing in any significant way because it is so important to this drainage, which was completely compromised when 295 was cut in and changed the direction of water flow. The Soil Conservation Service has taught us that several times. So we have to be responsible for this rich agricultural land. This is a space where that is not preserved. That doesn't mean it won't be as planted or as much in agriculture as is reasonable, feasible. But I don't see like a major risk of a big development or anything in that space. So I just wanted to kind of share that image so that everyone had a grasp on the non-preserved plot that we're talking about. And like we say, the Charland Farms is important. There's only a handful of farmers left in Lower Makefield Township. With one exception, I've visited with every one of them, and Charland has the next generation following up with the young farmer Tim. I can't say that for the other farms. They tend to be baby boomers like myself. So we do want to be sure we respect our farmers and respect our farmland and keep as much of it as we can, rest assured. Erica, is there any other public comment?
Yes, there is. I have Gerald Ann coming in. And she's in the room with us now.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, hi. So I'm from New York originally, but I'm living in California, and I got this change.org, and I decided to sign this petition to save this beautiful piece of property. because we're struggling to stop this development craze in California. And I'm trying to work on our neighborhood because there's a beautiful historical home that they're going to demo in a grove of Torrey pines, mature grove, and 173 other trees. So I just am enjoying listening to people that know how to preserve historical pieces of property. And I loved what you said. There was a historical gem that they're never going to take. I mean, you really need to give a civics lesson out here to our council because they're just not getting it. And I was wondering if you could give me that person that said it was easy to remove lead paint, because there's a property that they bought about 5 years ago that's an old school that's loaded with lead paint, and they haven't been able to do anything with it for 5 years. It's just sitting there. So I don't know if the same rules apply in California for the lead paint removal as they do in your area, but I sent an email if I could get that person's name. It sounded like you said it was real easy. Anyway, I just telling you that I'm enjoying this work that you're doing, even might seem, laborious.
Fred,
and that.
Thank you, Jerry. And Fred, are you willing to share? Is it John's email? No, that wasn't John. It was Steve's email. The contractor.
Actually, I don't have his. I'd have to go through John.
Okay.
And see if he wants to share that. But I think
whenever.
I think what he was explaining is that if you're a certified contractor that's experienced in that remediation, that you are able to efficiently do that. But he's located in New Hampshire, so.
And I've been told by contractors in Pennsylvania that it's used as a scare tactic, but it's not that expensive to remediate, and people shouldn't be that frozen by it. But I don't know. But I'm sure California probably, or I suspect California has different regs, so you probably want to get a contractor locally that could give you some guidance.
Yeah, it's a money pit, the thing that they purchased, but it's right on the ocean. It's an old school. Anyway, yeah, I'm just enjoying listening to these people, and I like the way you're letting them talk back and forth like this. They don't let us do that. And in our council meetings, it's very disturbing. But anyway, yeah, thank you for what you're doing. I don't even know where this place is.
Well, thank you. We're covering 8 time zones between James in London and now you, Jerry Ann, in California. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Erica, any other public comment?
There's no more public comment.
Okay. Unless anyone has something else they want to bring up, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
That I think you're on mute.
We have to do a next meeting date.
Oh, darn it. Thank you. And we got to do action items. So my bad. We have a meeting in February, right, Bet?
I'm confused about that. So
I thought it was the.
Did we set it?
17th.
I thought it was as well.
Okay. It's not on my calendar. It might be on my other calendar.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I've got it on mine.
7:30 Zoom on the 17th.
Okay. Sorry.
And I'll remind Katie to be sure to get out to distribute the information necessary for that. Action items, Madam Secretary, did you?
How are you going to make assignments, or are you going to wait for people to volunteer to do writing assignments?
It's a volunteer committee. I think people should volunteer. Yeah. Hopefully, but before the end of the weekend, though.
So we should email you.
Yeah,
Is that what you would
let's
like?
do it by email. Let's do it by
Okay.
email. It's efficient.
Okay, are there any other action items?
I didn't have any, except, I mean, Fred's gonna get a date with the neighbor that's reconstructed, renovated the barn and distribute that. When I get a time and date with the Stewarts to walk the property and look at some of the buildings from their vantage point, I'll let everyone know that. And I think that was the only action items that I had. And
Should we do a motion to adjourn?
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Very good.
Good
9:31.
night, everyone.